Hi everyone, my name is Joanna Cuppy. I'm one of the pediatricians here at Rush. I'm also the chair of the Committee on Student Evaluation and Promotion, and I want to talk to you today about the early concern note. Just a little background on medical professionalism and Rush Medical College. There are a lot of definitions of medical professionalism, but they're unified by a recognition of our responsibilities as healthcare providers to patients, society, and our colleagues. We at Rush at the college believe that we have an obligation to the public to graduate physicians who we believe exemplify these core values. We also believe that the process of developing professional behavior begins at the time of entry to medical school, not just on clinical rotations. So, does it really matter? Well, yeah, there's a significant amount of literature that demonstrates a pretty strong relationship between physicians who are disciplined by regulatory bodies when they're attendings and those same physicians having professionalism issues at the medical school level. Um, so we know that there's a relationship that physicians who are disciplined often have had professionalism issues in the past. And as faculty, we have an obligation to identify unprofessional behaviors and correct those behaviors appropriately, and if needed, structure remediation plans to prevent future lapses in professionalism. So, why the yearly concern note? Well, first of all, no one's perfect. We want to provide a transparent forum to identify and discuss professionalism issues, both small and large. We need to be able to identify trends in student behavior that may indicate a larger problem, and we want to emphasize and allow and emphasize early intervention to help students with professionalism difficulties. So, what's the early concern note going to look like at Rush? So, this note has been in use in multiple institutions for over 20 years. Initially at UCSF, but it's also used at many U.S. medical schools, including several Chicago area schools like Northwestern and UIC. The version that we're going to use is adapted from the University of Texas Medical Branch. The early concern note was reviewed and approved by the COSUP for use in September 2017. We're planning on rolling it out for a 6-month pilot from November to May of next year. So, just some student concerns and some thoughts on them. So, some of the feedback that we've gotten is, we feel like there's a concern that students will feel that we're looking at them under the microscope. And from a faculty point of view, I would counter that this is actually an opportunity for early constructive intervention and feedback for lower level infractions. It creates a transparent forum for us to talk about professionalism in our profession, for us to help you by giving you constructive feedback, and for you to demonstrate improvement. Um, Many students, have told me that, one of the things that they find troubling is that when they're in the clerkships or, clinical settings, often they don't get feedback on, what are perceived as professionalism issues until they get their grade. And they wish they had had a chance, or until they get their evaluations, and they wish they had had knowledge of the perceived deficiencies so they would have a chance to correct them. Why do we care about these minor things? Um, so, small infractions, what we find at the COSUP level is that students who have major infractions often have had small infractions prior to that. And this gives us a chance to actually identify them and hopefully keep problems from escalating. What we want to avoid are higher level professionalism issues that are career that will detract from your career trajectory. So, what actually happens after a report is submitted? So, there's a PDF that was attached to your email that you got. Take a look at it, review its contents. The form is actually electronic, but that's the contents of the form. So, briefly though, the note includes an outline addressing the following: what was the incident in question, who was involved, and what category is the concern in. Ideally, the faculty member who makes the report discusses it with the student at the time. We are strongly encouraging this for faculty to actually discuss the issue with the student directly while filing the report. However, it's not mandatory. This is because we would rather hear about the behavior and bring it to the student's attention rather than miss the behavior due to any faculty student communication issues. So what happens after a report is submitted? So this graphic hopefully will help take you through it. So there's an observation by faculty. They file an early concern note, and they ideally conduct feedback with the student. At the same time, the note goes to the assistant dean. So if it's for M1, M2, it'll go to Dr. Levin. For M3, M4, it'll go to Dr. Zwecka. They'll review the note and discuss it with the student. Um, as long as it's not egregious or there aren't multiple infractions, we basically do documentation of what happened at the meeting and what the student response was, and the issue is closed for the moment. If there are multiple infractions or anything egregious happens, then it may lead to presentation at COSEP. That is at the discretion of the deans and the OMSP of whether or not they want to escalate to COSEP. At the same time, I think this provides students with a form to actually document their own response to the infraction. One of the things that is strongly encouraged, although not mandatory, but strongly encouraged, is that if a student receives an early concern note after discussing with faculty and the assistant dean, they can provide a response so that their reflection, understanding of the event, reasoning behind whatever happened is documented in your own words. So it's not somebody else interpreting what you have told them, it's you speaking for yourself. And we think that's very important to give you a voice in 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 this process. So frequently voiced concerns. Will this affect my grade? Is this going to show up on my dean's letter? So the early concern note is a separate pathway in itself. It does not affect the grade or the dean's letter. However, if a professionalism lapse is significant enough, please remember that the lapse itself, a course or a clerkship director may decide to include something about that in their final grade report. So the course director's assessment and narrative on the grade may be included on the dean's letter. And if professionalism grade is below adequate, that could trigger course failure, and that's per existing Rush Medical College policy. So the early concern note really has nothing to do with this. This is just how we account for professionalism now in the dean's letter and in the grade, but the early concern note itself will not affect that. In fact, our hope is that by providing feedback early, that students have fewer professionalism issues. So if a student is presented to COSEP eventually for any kind of professionalism issue, this too can be included in the dean's letter, and that's per existing Rush policy. This seems punitive. Another concern. This seems punitive. They were just late, or substitute the behavior of your choice once. So the goal is not to be punitive, but we want it to be formative. So we're hoping to provide feedback to our students in a timely fashion, offer measures for correction. If it's a minor and isolated issue, the assistant dean has the option to simply speak with the student without further action. If there's a pattern that's apparent, despite intervention, then the issue may be reported to COSEP, again at the discretion of the deans and the OMSP. If it's escalated, then it may have consequences for the student's academic progression as it normally would. So another concern, I don't want to ruin someone's career for missteps so early. This is something that faculty have expressed to us. So a single isolate report is not going to ruin anyone's career. It's just going to allow us an opportunity for feedback and remediative action if needed. If there are underlying stressors that are tied into the observed behaviors, as is often the case when students who have not had issues prior start having professionalism issues, then we can work with our students and refer them for necessary services. If a report is considered egregious or there's a pattern identified, referral to COSEP can be initiated at the discretion of the OMSP. This will not happen with a single minor lapse or a first, that is documented in a first time early concern note. If you're referred to the COSEP for repeated issues and they're truly minor, the COSEP always has the option of doing nothing. It's rare, but that is an option. The COSEP has options. They can do nothing. They can vote to, design a remediation plan, which is often what we do, all the way through dismissal from the medical college. So our goal is hopefully to remediate and avoid anything like dismissal. But please remember, a single major professionalism lapse is always grounds for referral to COSEP. So another concern, how can you fix this? People are either professional or they're not. So yes and no. what we have found is that the earlier we can intervene, what the literature has found is the earlier you can intervene, the better that it is. It is much harder to remediate a student when they have a major lapse or they have a pattern of behavior that's so established. Um, it, so this requires time, money, resources. The student needs to take time to remediate. Oftentimes, they may have to take time out of the formal curriculum and actually have extra time in school to complete a remediation, which costs money. There are resources which need to be engaged. So, earlier the better is better, I think, for everybody. We also have an obligation to demonstrate to our students that professionalism is number one, worth developing and promoting in ourselves and the students at Rush. And number two, that it is a core value of our profession. So, when is this coming? The 6 month pilot is going to begin on November 6, 2017. It'll be introduced in both the pre clerkship courses and clerkships, so that's M3 and required M4, starting on October 30th. This has both briefly been discussed at M1 and M2 orientation this year. And then after the pilot period, we will look at introducing this to all faculty members. At this time, this is limited to several groups of people, but in the pre-clerkship years, basic science faculty and clinician educators, communications faculty, in the in the clerkship directors, um, course directors, and then course support staff like course coordinators, year coordinators, and clerkship coordinators. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at joannacuppy@rush.edu. The deans in the Office of Medical Student Programs are also well versed with this, and they can answer questions as well. Thank you for your time and attention.